What? That is super clean. This is the first thing I've ever cut. I just grabbed their file and threw it in there. And it turned out really awesome. Hey everyone, this is a review of the Creality Falcon 10-watt laser cutter and engraver. So I'm going to give you some setup tips to make sure you get accurate cuts out of this machine. I'm going to talk about performance, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. I'm also going to cover quite a bit on safety because lasers can be dangerous if used incorrectly. And I'm also going to cover needed accessories that you absolutely have to have with this before you get started cutting. In full disclosure, Creality contacted me and asked me to review this laser cutter, and since I had had such a good experience with their Ender 3V2 3D printer that I had purchased myself, I said yes, and they sent me the laser cutter, the honeycomb cutting mat, and then an air assist unit. So specifications for this thing, it is a 10-watt diode laser. That means it's actually outputting 10 watts of optical power. That's about as powerful as diode lasers get. If you want something more powerful that's going to cut faster and be able to cut more materials, you're looking at stepping up to a CO2 laser, which is much more expensive. The work area on this is 400 millimeters by 415 millimeters. That's just under 16 inches by 16 inches square. So it's a pretty good size work area. I cut this entire box out, every panel of it, in one go, laid out from top to bottom. It was just under the 16 inches, and it had some space on the side too. Assembly on this thing is pretty straightforward, although I do think the directions could use a little bit of work. When you bolt up the frame, it's very simple. It is perfectly square. I checked mine. I thought I might have to shim it or something, but it bolted up perfect. So that's great on Creality's manufacturing tolerances for this. You're not going to have to fuss with that. At least I didn't with mine. The gantry right here comes pretty much pre-assembled. All you have to do is put the laser diode itself on it. It has a stepper motor here on the side and then one on the belt that'll run this back and forth. And then it's got dual toothed belts on either side here and a toothed drive shaft that turns both of them at the same time. So that keeps everything square. And when you put this on, you want to check all of these rollers and make sure that they will not turn without moving their associated assembly, because you don't want any slipping going on between there. And if they do turn, you can adjust the eccentric nuts on here to make them a little bit tighter. Now, when you put the belts on and thread them through the rollers, you do have to make sure that you get them really tight. I put mine together and it seemed tight enough to me. I couldn't really find any slack in them. And then after a while, I started noticing after a fast traverse, when it wasn't cutting and moving to its next cutting spot, it moves a lot faster. I saw the first horizontal cut on each of these being about a millimeter off, and then it would follow up and be in the right spot on a subsequent pass. So that was just when it moved really fast, it stretched or something, and then when it settled back in, it was in the right spot. So that pointed to a belt tightness issue for me, and I looked at it, and sure enough, this belt over on the right side was loose, and I tightened it, and that seems to have fixed the problem. So I think that was on me for not getting the belt tight enough in the first place. That's just something to look out for. This does have a limit switch, so when you turn it on and before you start cutting, it will auto home and make sure it knows where it's at. And it'll just come down to this corner over here, and then it'll go back up to where it's supposed to be cutting and start cutting. So the cutting process, once you've got this all set up, is really straightforward. First, you need to focus your laser. It's got 3 different steps on their focusing block. You just put it underneath, loosen these 2 set screws, and let the laser shroud drop onto whatever thickness setting that you're using, and tighten the set screws back down. Now, when you're working with a new material with a laser cutter like this, I highly recommend making a test card. And basically what that is if you're cutting through or engraving, it's a series of iterations on a small area that lets you see how your laser performs on that material. So for this one, I varied the number of passes and the speed. I left the laser intensity at 100%. Those are basically the 3 things that you can adjust: number of passes, how fast you're going, and how hard you're driving the laser. So you can see here, I've got an array of, I know how fast I was going, and I can pick the optimum speed for which of these cuts looks the best.
Operation on this is pretty straightforward. It comes with an 8 GB flash card that you can just stick in here, and it has a couple test files that you can get started with right away. It's got the G-code on there, and basically you can put any G-code file on that flash card, put it in here. You don't have to connect a laptop to this, and then turn it on, hit the button once, and it'll trace out the frame of where it's going to cut, and you can position your workpiece, and then you can hit the button again and it'll start cutting. In addition to being able to print G-code files off the flash drive, you can also connect a laptop to this and control it directly with Lightburn. Now, it comes with a trial of Lightburn. Lightburn is very economical. It's budget priced for DIYers and hobbyists, so I highly recommend getting the full version of that once your trial expires. It's a very well featured software that works great with this laser cutter. Now, one thing I am a little bit disappointed with this machine is the cable management isn't the best. It does have cable sheaths on it. They're going to protect the cables, but mine actually drags back and forth if I'm going all the way over and then all the way back. It'll drag on my cutting honeycomb, and it's an abrasive surface, and this is rubbing back and forth. So I'm going to have to do something about this to pull it up out of the way when it's doing that. I'll just have to get more creative on how I'm routing this and fix that, because otherwise that's going to be a long-term problem that will develop. So just know that there isn't great cable management with this. They did address it somewhat with this sheath that is abrasion resistant. It's just that I wish it was a little bit more neat and tidy. All right, let's talk about performance for this tool. I'm actually really impressed with what I can cut with this. So Creality's specification is a 12mm 1-pass cut depth for wood board. This is basswood, and it's 1/2 inch, which is essentially 12mm. I did a test on it, and I got down to 50mm per minute. It still wasn't cutting through in 1 pass. My 2-pass cut lit it on fire. Or just about. It was smoldering. I didn't actually see any flames, but there was a ton of smoke. And so Creality clarified for me that 12mm depth is for balsa wood, not basswood. I don't have any balsa on hand, but they told me 150mm per minute is what they use for balsa on 1-pass cutting. So I would recommend, I've been using 1/8 inch ply, and I do 2 passes at 300mm per minute, which is still a pretty good rate, and it cuts all the way through 1/8 inch Baltic birch doing that. So I would just multiply your number of passes that you're doing for your thickness based on that. Every 1/16 of an inch, do 1 to 2 passes, and you should be fine. You can cut up to 18mm material with this, is what their focal length specifications are. I've done 1/2 inch, and it seems to work pretty well. I think the repeatability on this laser is very good. Once I fixed the issue with the loose belts on it, it's tracing the same path every single pass that it takes. I can't see any deviation in it. So even when you have to take a bunch of passes, it's accurate enough that it traces the same exact path multiple times, and you get a good cut quality even though you've gone over it, 3, 4, 5 times. So this box out of 1/8 inch Baltic birch took about 25 minutes to cut out. I think that was with 2 passes at 300mm per second. It worked great. So something this size, you just set it and go. I always stay with the laser cutter in the basement just in case there's a fire. I need to be nearby to be able to shut it down and put it out. So it's a safety concern. You're burning things, you don't want to leave it alone, but you don't have to be hands-on the entire time. I just spent the time cleaning up my workshop, basically, or working on other things, or you can plan your next project while your machine is running. So it's not time that you're going to have to sit there and do nothing or be fully dedicated to that project, which is really great. It's kind of a force multiplier. You can design something, cut it, and then you can go on to design the next thing while this one's cutting out. The engraving quality on this is pretty good too. I just followed their instructions on how to set it up, and I think the quality looks great as far as that goes. This is just in basswood, and it's their standard settings. Now, one of the first projects I made with this is this NASA logo. This is made out of hard maple, wenge, padauk, and another hard maple layer. So this is all cut out of 1/16 inch hardwoods. It turned out awesome. Just the delicate features that you can make with this, you can't make that cut with anything other than a laser. It would shatter if you tried to do it with a traditional tool. It was detailed enough to get all of these star cutouts. I was just blown away with the quality that I was able to produce after just spending a little bit of time working on the vector format for this file. Another fun project that I did is this box with a built-in hinge. So this is all laser cut. It is finger joints, and these are just press fit together. There's actually no glue on this right now. I'm going to go back and glue it eventually, but it just came out really well. You can see all the inside there. It's just a super slick box, and this is actually made. There are online generators where you can make boxes like these in whatever dimensions you want and then just laser cut them right out. All right, let's talk about some of the accessories that Creality sent to me with this laser cutter. The first one is the cutting mat. This is a honeycomb cutting mat. It's actually a nice quality. It's 1/4 inch hex spacing, so it's really close spacing. You can cut tiny things on this and not have them fall through. It has a flame-proof bottom piece that goes underneath it. You need to have something that is flame-proof if you are cutting. And you also need something that holds everything up off the base, because if you don't have that, the back side of your cuts is going to be just horribly ugly because you're going to have it smoldering underneath there instead of having the beam break through cleanly. So you need a cutting mat like this. I thought it was a little bit weird that the one Creality included was basically 1 foot by 1 foot when the cutting area is 16 inches by 16 inches. So I went out and bought my own that's bigger than this one that covers up pretty much the entire cutting area that I have to work with. The other thing that Creality sent me was the air assist unit. And this thing gives a ton of benefits for you. It's going to have less soot around the edges of your cut. When you're cutting, you're going to get cleaner cuts out of this. You also get faster cutting out of it. I was actually cutting a shape that I had already cut out on material that I had already worked with, and I had dialed everything in so it would cut that material, and I forgot to turn on air assist, and it didn't cut all the way through when I was using it without air assist. So air assist helps you cut faster, and it gives you cleaner cuts. And the way it works basically is it's like blowing on a fire. It burns faster, burns brighter. That's essentially what you're getting here, and it's blowing all the smoke and soot out of the way when you're cutting as well. So this is the first thing I ever cut with a Creality laser. It turned out absolutely phenomenal. I was super impressed by it. And then just to see what the difference was without air assist, I ran the file again with air assist turned off, and you can see there's a lot more scorching. There's actually a wider kerf because that piece is thinner now. So overall, there's a huge difference in cut quality and a lot less scorching when you are using air assist. To install it, it was pretty straightforward. It didn't come with any instructions though. You just unscrew the laser lens, screw in the cone around it, and then connect the tube to that, and you've got a separate shroud that you replace the original shroud with. And then once you got all that done, you route the tube out to the air assist unit, and it works great. This is fairly quiet for being basically a miniature compressor, and it's got little isolating feet that help it not vibrate too much, which is great because you don't want a bunch of vibrations translating to your laser cutter. I haven't had any problems with that, so it works pretty well. All right, I definitely want to talk about laser safety because there are a lot of obvious things and there are some less obvious things when it comes to staying safe and operating safely with a laser cutter. The obvious one to me is optical safety. So Creality has a shroud that goes around the laser that is going to be down right almost on the workpiece that's going to block most of the light that's emitted from the diode laser. That's great. However, this is magnetically held on there. If it gets bumped, it could fall off. Also, there's the chance for reflected light if you've got a shiny surface that you're cutting, or if you've got a shiny honeycomb cutting mat underneath it. You could always get reflected laser light that is still hazardous and damaging to your eyes. So because of the chances for reflected light even when you're using this little shroud, Creality also includes a pair of laser safety goggles, which I think is a good step towards being safe optically with the laser. However, this pair of safety goggles, it has like an ANSI generic rating and a CE generic rating on it. Those ratings aren't specifically for blocking laser light, and it doesn't specify what wavelength of light it blocks either. This is a 455 nanometer laser. It's blue. These goggles are green. The things that I look at in them that are blue look less blue, but I can still see a little bit of blue. With these, this is a certified pair that I bought separately. This is an OD6 rated CE certified pair of safety glasses rated for 190 to 540 nanometer wavelengths of light. They're orange, which is blue blocking material. These were pretty economical for the price, and I thought they were worth getting something certified, so I know I am being safe. My eyesight is valuable to me. It is certainly worth the value of a pair of certified safety glasses. In addition to that, these goggles are for over top of regular glasses. I can still see out the bottom of these without being filtered. These ones conform very tightly to my face, and there are no gaps that aren't filtered in my vision. So the pair that I decided on is these Eagle pairs. You can see their stamp certification on them. I'll put a link in the video description so you can purchase these yourself. I would highly recommend doing so. So this is an open frame laser cutter, which means it doesn't have any box around it, which is actually really great if you want to do some pass-throughs. Light burn lets you do longer pieces than you actually have space for in your work area. And you can do that if you can slide a long workpiece through and keep referencing indexing marks. It'll line up all of what you're trying to cut and make one continuous piece. That's really cool. That's one of the big benefits of an open frame design like this. However, I highly recommend getting an enclosure, both for protecting stray reflections of laser light and for ventilation. It contains the fumes, it contains any reflections, and it's especially important if you're going to be cutting where anyone could stumble into your workplace. So if you have pets, if you have kids, if you have anyone else living in your house that might stumble into the room while you are laser cutting, I think, personally, that it is irresponsible to cut without an enclosure. Unfortunately, at this time, Creality doesn't offer their own enclosure that's custom fit for this machine. I did find one from a third-party vendor that was close enough that I could modify it slightly, and it works great. You can also build your own and make whatever specs that you want. It does need to have a window, so you can make sure that you're not lighting something on fire by accident while you're cutting it. Now, I mentioned I bought a third-party one. I did have to modify it and cut out a spot for this controller because it wouldn't fit otherwise. But other than that, the dimensions work really well. It's a really standard size dimension for 10-watt laser cutters. So in addition to offering optical safety, an enclosure like this one has a secondary function of containing smoke and allowing you to exhaust it or filter it. Because basically anything you cut with your laser is going to have combustion byproducts because you're burning it. So if it's wood, it's basically just wood smoke. If it's something like acrylic, it's going to be pretty smelly. You don't want to be breathing any of those fumes in. So initially I bought a small fume filter that is actually marketed with another brand's 10-watt laser cutter, so I thought it would be good enough. It is unfortunately not. At first, when I was just doing some light cutting, it could handle all the fume extraction. When I got into heavier cutting, I could definitely smell smoke. It wasn't a ton of smoke, but it was definitely there. So if I'm smelling smoke, I'm definitely getting those byproducts in my lungs, and I didn't want that. So I added another fan to it, and it seemed to be working pretty well, and I think the activated charcoal filter in this is already saturated because I'm starting to smell smoke again. So if you do decide to go the filtration route, you need something that is pretty heavy duty, and those type of filters get expensive fast. It needs to have a pre-filter to extend the life of the HEPA filter, which is required for particulate. And then it also needs to have an activated carbon or activated charcoal in it to collect carbon monoxide and the smell of the smoke as well. So you've got HEPA filter, activated charcoal, and it has to have both of those, and a pre-filter will extend the life of the HEPA. Now, if you just have a thin little sheet of activated charcoal, which is what that one has, it's going to get saturated very quickly, and it's not going to be effective after that initial period, which I think is what happened with mine. So you need one with a very large activated charcoal filter, which gets expensive. A much more economical option, if you have a window in your shop or your garage or even a basement window, is just exhausting everything outside. It's basically just wood smoke for the majority of what I do, and you just need a big fan and a duct, and an insert to put in your window, and it's a much better way to keep your work area clean, not smelling like smoke, and have the air safe to be breathable. And as I mentioned fires, you definitely want to have a fire extinguisher nearby in order to put out any potential fires that can be created, because you're burning things to cut them, so you need to have a fire extinguisher. Now, something else you need to keep in mind when you are picking materials to be laser cutting is you have to know which ones are safe. Wood, obviously safe. Plywood sometimes has formaldehyde in it, so you need to know that you're getting formaldehyde-free plywood because you don't want to be breathing formaldehyde fumes. While it is safe to laser cut acrylic, a lot of other plastics aren't safe to laser cut. Anything with PVC in it is going to create chlorine gas when you burn it with the laser, so you definitely don't want to be breathing that in. Sometimes materials are non-obvious on risks too. Rubber is safe to laser cut and make stamps out of, which is really cool, and that's why I bought this. However, I just bought it from a random Amazon seller, and some rubber has PVC in it, which I didn't realize when I bought this. So I don't know whether or not this has PVC in it or if it's pure rubber, but I don't trust a random Amazon seller enough that I'm going to take a risk on that. So this is just not going to get lasered. So that's a lot of safety information to take in. Hopefully I didn't scare you off of laser cutting because it is an amazing hobby and I'm having a ton of fun with it. I just want everyone else to be safe. A laser like this is really versatile. You can cut wood, you can cut paper, fabric, you can engrave and cut leather, rubber. There's a ton of different projects you can do with this. It really opens the door to a lot of precision that you couldn't get otherwise. So overall, I am very impressed with this machine. I really like the projects it allows me to do. It lets me create things that I couldn't create with any other type of tool, and I think that's awesome. So hopefully you enjoyed this review. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section below, and hopefully it was a good primer on getting started with laser cutting. I certainly enjoyed learning everything myself.